Facebook Live broadcast of our forum this evening for equality in education. My name is Melissa Snively, and I am the current chair of the Hillsborough County School Board, but I am not a panelist this evening. I will actually be moderating, so I'd like to welcome all of the panelists who have joined us this evening, and hopefully everyone who is going to watch is getting on to Facebook Live now to listen to this very important discussion that we're going to have this evening with our esteemed panelists. And I want to let you know, Ms. Amato has this on her Safe Bus for Us page. However, she is going to also record this and put it on YouTube as well, so that if you don't have access or someone doesn't have access to Facebook Live or Facebook, then they can watch it on the YouTube channel as well. So, so we're very excited to be here for this the first time that we're doing something like this. And I'm at home, so you might hear some noises between my husband and children and dogs. Please excuse any distractions. I'll try and mute my computer when they're very excited. They just got fed and they want to go out. So they're about to go for a walk. I want to welcome all the viewers and our esteemed panelists today, and thank you to Ms. Amato for hosting this. And if you don't know who she is, she administrates and is a child advocate on Safe Bus for Us, which is a Facebook page that she has been, for probably several years now, has been sharing information on. And so before we introduce the rest of the panelists, I'd like to thank Ms. Amato and give her an opportunity to maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what your connection is to education, and then why you decided to do a forum, put together a forum like this, and what's your vision and your mission for this forum and any forums going forward.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Snively. Really appreciate it. My name is Josephine Amato, and born and raised in Spanish Harlem, I'm keenly aware of that our public schools are the first door to the American dream. And because of that, any barriers to public schools is a barrier to the American dream. And as a wife to a soldier for over 30 years, we had the privilege of being stationed in Kuwait in a designated combat zone. And for 3 years, one of the things that I observed that is so amazing about who we are as a people and as a nation is how we are united, how our diversity and our inclusion makes us invincible. And the fact that we are so united on an idea makes us invincible. And when I look at some of the challenges to making sure that the door to the American dream is open for all of our children, that there are no barriers so they can fully reach their highest educational potential, I think about what makes us invincible as Americans. And with that, I know that united together as a community, we can remove all those barriers and create change for our country and for our county and for our public schools, for our children. And that's my motivation. It's always for our children.
So thank you so much for sharing that. That's really important. And if you could talk a little bit about what you hope to get out of a forum like this forum tonight and future forums, if you choose to coordinate future forums.
So I thought about the Resolute desk and the presidential desk, the Resolute desk. And I thought about creating a community conversation and creating solutions to the challenges that are evidence-based, data-driven, that all of us know about, but that we must start having conversations about how to resolve it as a community. Because there isn't a district that's the public school, and that's the parent, and that's the teacher, and that's the politician. No, it's all of us together. All of us have our children in our public schools. We have our nieces in our public schools, our nephews, our grandchildren. All of us have, skin in the game. So when I think about having a Resolute Forum, it's about having community conversations and community leaders come together to develop solutions. And that was my idea behind having Resolute Forums.
Awesome. So what we hope to achieve then, after having some discussion on a couple of topics tonight, is some items that we can actually take back, that I can take back as a school board member, that we can take back to the school district, to the superintendent, and perhaps make some positive impact in the
Mhm.
school district, take some action. We
Exactly.
tend to, I think a lot of us tend to be on panels and tend to have discussions. I know Mr. Butler, who I'll introduce in just a moment, was telling me he has been on probably 10 panels in the last 4 to 6 weeks, probably has panel fatigue at this point. So thank you for being on the panel with us tonight, Brian. But at the end of the day, we can talk a lot about issues and challenges, but really we want to talk about some tangible solutions tonight and what we can do with that. And so since I mentioned Brian first, I'm going to ask him to actually kick us off a little bit. And so if you could take a moment to introduce yourself to the group, Brian, who you are, how you're connected to the school district, or why education is so important to you, and then what you hope to get out of this panel discussion today. So Brian?
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Josephine, for having the foresight to put this together, because this is very important that we bring a vast group of leaders together to talk about some of the challenges in our schools. Our schools are just a subset of our community and our society, so it's important that we pay attention to what's happening within our schools. I'm a retired Army officer, served 22 years, commanded troops in combat on one end, worked in the White House on another end, and really enjoyed my time in the military. We came to Tampa in 2006, and I literally couldn't find a job. Our kids went through middle school and high school here in Tampa. And when I was unable to find a job, I started a company out of our house. Today we have about 100 employees. Our company is called Vistra Communications. And we provide public relations, marketing, and consulting services for a range of clients: government, state, local, education, nonprofits, and corporate. I'm very involved in the business community of Tampa. Serve on the executive board of the chamber, WEDU Public Broadcasts, Visit Tampa Bay Partnership, and several other organizations. I have an affinity for education, and I understand the importance of little kids getting off to great starts with education. I'm a product of a school in South Florida, in Palm Beach County, and I'm not convinced that there was a focus on ensuring that little brown and black kids in my community got the best education. So I'm passionate about ensuring that in this community that we stay focused on ensuring that all kids, no matter where they live, have access to great education. And that's what got me involved with, in particular, with Mort Elementary. I serve as the CEO mentor to the principal at Mort, and have been for about the last 4 or 5 years through the Council of Education PASS program. And through that experience of being in that school and having a deeper understanding of what's happening in the school, I went to the superintendent, and he allowed us to create a program that we call CEOs in Schools, where we placed 170 CEOs in each of the elementary schools in the county last year. And we're excited about the opportunity to do that again. So I'm very focused on how we can bring business solutions to helping out the school district and the kids that are in our schools. As far as what I hope to get out of this, I'm always trying to learn and find things that I can help take back to the business community, that we can help instill within the school district to help make us a more vibrant community. I'm also looking at, how do we ensure that we have diversity in teachers, diversity in staff, diversity in key leaders within the school district. So I don't mind asking hard questions, because I think sometimes they need to be asked, and I don't have a problem doing that. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. And we're so glad that you're able to join us tonight. And I know you've been on quite a few panels lately, and hopefully you find this worthwhile your time, and it gives you something to take back to the business community that will help our school district. So
I'm absolutely looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, we're going to go to Monica Narain. Monica, if you could answer the same questions, tell us a little about who you are, how you're connected to the school district, and what you hope to get out of this forum tonight.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again, Josephine and Melissa, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I do think it's a very crucial time to have this, and I do appreciate your work towards it. So thank you again. Again, my name is Monica Narain. I am a teacher in Hillsborough County. I teach elementary school. I've been teaching for almost 20 years. I have two children who also are children in the Hillsborough County School District. One is a rising middle schooler, and one's going to be a rising third grader. And I've taught mainly in Title I schools throughout my career. So I'm familiar with some of the challenges that Title I schools face. Even Title I Renaissance schools, I'm very familiar with some of the challenges they face. And my overall goal or desire for this evening is really to and we will discuss it later, but to really come up with some actionable items that can be implemented immediately as it pertains to just race, diversity, and equality within our schools, and not just not with the students, but with the teachers and the staff. So I'm looking forward to the conversation that we'll have and being able to come up with some solutions that will make, school a place for all students, no matter where they live, what color they are, what neighborhood they come from, so that we can, as Josephine said, achieve that American dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you also for being with us this evening. And I think it's nice that we have a variety of panelists with different backgrounds and different experiences. And so thanks for being a teacher in our school district and for everything you do for our kids. So we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts this evening as well. So thanks. Next, we'll go to Terry Connor, who is new-ish, not new to education, but new to Hillsborough County. And if you could introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background and how you're connected now to this school district and what you hope to get out of the panel this evening.
Well, thank you, Ms. Snively, and good evening, everybody. I am Terry Connor. I am a lifelong educator. So I began my career coming out of college as a middle school science teacher, and spent time there, and actually rose as an administrator at the school that I taught at as an AP, and then eventually became the principal there. So served in a non-Title I setting there, and then moved to a Title I high school and spent about 4 years as a high school principal, and have just really enjoyed my career as a school-based administrator. I then moved from Duval County to Clay County and served at the district level as the chief academic officer while serving there over the last 4 years. And one of the things that brings me to Tampa is our superintendent. I followed the superintendent to Tampa because I know his passion around the issues that we're going to be discussing today. It's really great to work in a career where you can make an impact that is, again, we talk about schools being a reflection of our community. And when you want to see the success of your community, what better way to impact that than to be boots on the ground in the education system? And that's really kind of driven my work in wanting to be impactful because education really is the key to everyone's success in America. And so it's a joy to come to work and to be able to help be a part of the solution. And I hope that through tonight's forum that, I will learn something from the panelists that I can help as my new role as Deputy Superintendent of Instruction here in Tampa, that we can take back and we can actually put to action some real actionable steps that are going to help put us on the path to where we all strive to be. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Terry, and welcome again to Hillsborough County. And we look forward to hearing your perspectives this evening, as well as what we could possibly do taking this forward. Because you're in a position, and I'm in a position to possibly make some decisions that could actually impact the students in a positive way based on the discussions that we have this evening. So last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Arlicia Oates. Arlicia, would you like to introduce yourself and chime in about the forum this evening and what you hope to get out of our discussion?
Yes. Thank you, ladies, for inviting me. I'm excited about tonight. I am Erlisha Oates. I am, first of all, a parent of a senior of 2020. Also have a son that attends Shihai Elementary. I'm also the VP of Advocacy for Hillsborough County PTA, the PTA president over at Shihai, where my son attends, and I'm a family support coordinator for the SEEDS program, where I do case management for the kids that attend achievement schools. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's definitely needed. The community and the kids that I work with, they are crying out for help. It's, you know, it's time for solutions, and it's time for us to get out and do the work so we can help the children.
Sorry, maybe I was on mute there? Sorry.
Yeah, I unmuted you, thank God.
No, sorry, just trying to thank Erlisha.
All right, for everyone to know, we're tech challenged here.
Yes. So for those of you who just are tuning in, my name is Melissa Snively, and I am, by the grace of God and technology here this evening, I am the moderator. I've been asked to be the moderator for this evening's forum that is hosted by Josephina Mato, Safe Plus for Us, and a little bit just quickly about my connection to education. I've served on the Hillsborough County School Board since 2014, have 4 children, all of which either have attended or still attend Hillsborough County Public Schools, have always been an advocate for public education, being a product of public education, and an advocate for making sure that our students are getting the best, that we are the first and best choice for students in our school district. So, so with that, we are live on Facebook, and hopefully with this recording that we're doing, Ms. Amato is going to be able to post this also on YouTube at a later time for those who are not able to access Facebook. So anyway, thank you all, whoever's out there that's viewing. We appreciate you tuning in this evening, and hopefully being a part of our conversation about equality in education. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Amato, who's going to tee us up for the first question.
Sorry, I've been sorry, everyone. My phone rang. Okay, so to begin us off, the summary of the challenge highlighted by the community. The community's highlighted gaps in the inequality to resources and opportunities for students in public schools. The digital divide is a term generally referred to in education sector, referencing inequalities in physical access to technology, as well as imbalances in resources and skills needed to effectively participate as a digital student. Studies conducted show the requirement of technology resources outside of the school setting to support in-school-based educational requirements are not equally available to all students. According to the National Education Statistics, the percentage of 5 to 17-year-old students with no internet access differed by students in race and ethnic origin. Access also differed geographically. Remote, rural locales had the highest percentage of students with no internet access. 41% of Black students and 26% of Hispanic American students living in remote rural areas had no internet access. Since Hillsborough is both urban and rural, our district digital divide is hit on both sides of the access points. And that is the summary of the challenge.
Okay, so thank you for sharing some of that information with us, Josephine. So the first question talks a little bit about what you believe are the greatest challenges to the digital divide and some ideas to close it. And you know, we just came off of the last 9 weeks of school having to do remote learning. And so remote learning was probably one of the more challenging things that the school district faced. Because not every student, we realized it was quite an eye-opener, you know, not every student has access to digital devices. And so the school district, I think, did a a great job trying to check out as many digital devices as they could. I think we ended up checking out about over 40,000 digital devices and had several hundred hotspots donated to us and purchased by the school district. But I kind of want to hear what some eye-opening things were that you experienced, whether you teaching or as a parent or as a community member, as an administrator. What were some things that opened your eyes about the digital divide, and what went well, and what could we do better as a school district to keep closing that gap for students who don't have as much access as other students do? And then I have part two of that question, but I want to kind of hear what the panelists have to think about what they experienced with that last 9 weeks, and kind of what their thoughts are on access for students. So Alicia, I think you said you would like to go ahead and start the discussion.
Yes, I would. So what I've noticed over the last 9 weeks was, like you say, the divide. In my community, and with the kids that I work with, they didn't have access to the internet. And if they, with the partnership the school district tried to put together, not having access to the internet or having a bill, they weren't able to get the internet. So it was more of social economic issues. The kids not having access to the internet. The kids getting access to the internet, but not knowing how to work the laptop. Because in some of the achievement schools, laptops or technology is not readily available. So having the ability for the students and the parent to be able to work the laptop to get on the different level ASB or different platforms to do the work was a big issue that I noticed in my field.
Thank you, Alicia, for that input. Who would like to comment on that as well? Who would like to go next? Mr. Connor?
Having come in 3 months ago, kind of in the midst of the pandemic, and kind of seeing the state of where we were, I got to hand it off to Hillsborough for really turning on a dime the e-learning process. That was a bit of a heavy lift, and to turn that around, where we have basically gone from having face-to-face traditional school, and then within a week's time told it's time to shut down, and now everyone's going virtual. And to Ms. Snively's point, where we had to distribute 40,000 laptops, develop curriculum that was going to be front-facing for students and parents to engage in learning at home, was a great accomplishment. Now, I will tell you the challenges that Ms. Alicia just mentioned, I think are not only Hillsborough's challenges, but across the nation, is that digital literacy piece. It's how do families interact daily with technology beyond using a cell phone or some kind of small mobile device. What are we doing in schools to really bolster that digital literacy piece? And not just in the schools, but how are we bringing in the community to help parents who may not have that access or have not been used to that access of technology, and how to log on, how to check email, how to construct an email, how to communicate back and forth through some of those platforms. That's a challenge that I think moving forward, as we, depending on where we go with this pandemic, as we move into the new school year, we need to find solutions and how to educate not only the students, but the parents and the caregivers on that digital literacy piece that is so critical for the success of students. So I thank you, Ms. Alicia, for bringing up that point, because that's a challenge that I noticed as well.
And just to kind of set the stage, this is really a conversation, and I know we want every panelist to have input, but chime in if you want to respond to a panelist comments, or ask questions, or share something. We don't want it to be so formal that we just go panelist to panelist. We want to have a good, robust conversation about some of these things. So feel free to chime in when you want to. So who would like to, anybody else have something they'd like to share? Monica? Yes.
Yes, I do. I think that it's to the the point of both Erlisha and Terry in the sense that, so as a teacher, you know, I face this, you know, I do agree that we had to, as a district, make some very quick decisions and turn on a dime. And so given the short notice that we did, I actually think that, you know, we did well in that area. But the challenge is, you know, I appreciate, you know, however the partnership worked out with Spectrum for those families who were able to benefit from that partnership, to be able to have that free internet. But as we know, there are some families who were not able to benefit from that. And then the technology piece, we were able to hand out, you know, a laptop per family. Some of our families have 3, 4, 5 children in elementary school, say, right? So now we're having that. How do we, you know, juggle a computer schedule, right? When this teacher has a Zoom at this time and somebody, you know, so that was a bit of something. And my answer is not, oh, we'll give, you know, family laptop for every child. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just mentioning some of the challenges that we still faced. To Terry's point and to Alicia's point about parents, I teach in a highly predominantly Hispanic community where most of the parents are Spanish speaking and no English speaking. So then became another obstacle that we figured out how to, you know, kind of overcome during the school year when we're face to face. But now we have a second obstacle now that we are on e-learning, how to now communicate with parents as well. And I was successful in being able to motivate my students and have them complete assignments and kind of make those connections with parents and things like that. But I talked to other teachers, and some of the challenges they faced were just, you know, just simple access to parent. You know, some of my high school friends, their students kind of went missing, if you will, once they didn't have a place to report every single day. The benefit, I think, from this experience is that, you know, our students actually have a lot more technology understanding and a lot more tech savvy than maybe we give them credit for, right? And we learned that because now I'm shoving Nearpod and Edpuzzles and all these things, and like, here, do this, and they were actually able to do that. And I think one of the ways that we kind of help continue that is not, if we come back to a traditional school year, we don't let technology fall by the wayside and we're only doing it 30 minutes a day when you have to go on to, you know, whatever it's escaping me right now, the program that you use, you know, for reading or whatever the case may be, like it needs
like
to be
iReady or
yes,
whatever.
thank you, that's it, thank you, iReady, Khan, whatever. We need to continue as teachers to incorporate these technology platforms throughout the school year so that digital learning is an active part of our teaching. You know, what would be helpful is if all of those free programs that we got due to COVID were something that a district would purchase, so that we wouldn't have to, teachers, you know, only be able to rely on the free trial, which, you know, you get limited access. And, you know, if that's something the district's interested into, you know, purchasing for everybody, now we have the technology. And if for some reason we have to turn on a dime again, that's one less thing that we would have to overcome because we're doing it already. So
Right.
Those are just a couple of thoughts that I have as it pertains to that. I do think that making sure that the community is invested. Mr. Butler mentioned the CEO program. We have to leverage those partnerships. We have to let the community, help the community understand that though you may not have any children here because maybe you moved from another state and you know, you're a grandparent now, but if we don't invest in our community, if we don't invest in our future, our students, if we don't invest in the future, then I'm not sure what we have left when we're done. So I really feel like we need to kind of figure ways to get partnerships beyond, you know, some of the larger corporations and tap into some of these smaller ones who can help us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. I think I might have heard an actionable item in there with regard to programs or curriculum that can help students get more comfortable with technology literacy. And so, and as a parent, I found out quickly that my kids are not just because they're used to being on an iPad or they're comfortable with an iPhone, that they don't necessarily understand some of the other functions that were required when it came to uploading a file or downloading a file or sharing information via technology. And so that might be something that the school district can consider when evaluating how to weave in technology learning to our students. So, but you also mentioned the community, which is important as well. And I know Mr. Butler, with his experience, and I know you want to be able to take something tangible back to your business community as well. But what is your knowledge or your opinion on technology and making equal access to it as a business owner, as a CEO? What are your thoughts on that for our especially for our Black and brown students?
Well, first of all, the last 90 to 100 days or so have presented tremendous challenges, not just to the school and the students, but also to the business community as well. And I'll use my own self as an example. We removed our headquarters personnel out of offices in about the first week in March, going into the second week of March, and they've been working from home. And we have learned a lot in this process. We've actually become more efficient in lots of ways, and our workforce has gotten more confidence and understanding that they can continue to service our clients, get their work done in most cases, and while doing this at home. And we still haven't reopened our office. So tremendous learning, and we're documenting everything, trying to make sure, because we know that we won't go back to doing the same thing as we were in February. I have more of a question than a statement, and maybe I should direct this to Mr. Connor. What have we learned in the last 100 days that may have caused us to, maybe causing you to think more radically about, the education system as it used to look? What are you thinking, and what's on your mind as far as, is it time for a radical change in just the way that we've been presenting education the same way we did when I was a kid?
Absolutely. That's a great question that I probably can't answer fully, but I can tell you this has been a phenomenon that has altered the way I think everyone operates and everyone thinks about traditional education. I think we've said it before, even before the pandemic, that, the old traditional style of education where, you used to skill up the workforce to go out and to work mechanical types of jobs. And now in the 21st century, it's more technical and informational technology types of jobs. So we've always kind of had that discussion around, how do we reach our 21st century learners? And what does that look like? And does it look like it did back in the, back when traditional schooling really started? And I think we all agree that no, I mean, we need to create thinkers, critical thinkers that are problem solvers. We don't want rote mechanics being taught to our students. And so this platform now, as far as the e-learning process, has really opened up and all of our eyes as to what can be accomplished and how things can look differently. I don't know that I have the answer to what that looks like, but I can tell you that, just as you said, Mr. Butler, around your workforce being more efficient, being more confident, that now I think that we have something we can leverage with our workforce, our teachers, our administrators. The fact that the collaboration that is occurring virtually, the interactions between students and teachers now gives us more of that confidence that we can look to see what other educational options will we have in the futures, because they will be different. There will be a new normal. And I look forward to the day when we get back to face-to-face and we have students in the classroom, because there's nothing more impactful than having a teacher in front of students that are to make that daily impact, because it's more about not just the instruction, it's those relationships that really help drive that learning in the classroom. But we can take what we've learned through this e-learning process, the technical pieces of it, and the philosophical things that we know that we have to do to reach students and prepare them for jobs that don't exist now, and we can blend that to create educational options that are going to meet the needs of all of our students. So whether they go back to face-to-face, whether they do total virtual or something in between, we now have some sort of a roadmap, not a complete one, but we're learning day by day of what things are working, what those challenges are, and what things we can leverage moving forward. So it is causing all of us to think differently. And hopefully, you know, as time goes on, we will be able to create something that will be really setting our students up for success for the skills that they're going to need beyond now and into the future.
Good, very good points. Josephine, what do you also think about, and I think Alicia says she looks like she wants to say something too. Because
I do.
This is a great topic.
Right
But go ahead.
I know,
Go
so I
ahead.
put us all on Gallard, so all of us could get into it.
No, go ahead, Alicia.
So, like you said, actionable items. When we go back to school, put in programs that includes parents. Educational programs into the school so you can have the parent at the school volunteering to help in the classroom, and also have an opportunity for the parent to learn technology or different things so they can work with the kids at home. Because this experience opened everyone's eyes to the fact that some parents can't help their children at home. And in order for us to fix that, we have to have parents come into the school, being a part of that educational platform and learning how it is done now different from when they were in school. So bridging that gap with parents, the school, and the teachers, so it can be all kids have everything they need at home and in school. Because we know if it's not being taught at home, it doesn't go far.
Right. You have to have that foundation at home. And we probably learned that through this last experience. A lot of parents need technology training too. So what do you tell the parent who might be working full-time or 2 jobs and they're not able to come to the school? I mean, ideally, yes, we would love parents to come into the schools and learn with their student and offer programs and technology that, whether it's just learning the new, we're switching from EDSB to Canvas, learning Canvas, that's going to be a new software program, new learning management system. But how do we help the parents that are not able to come to the school because they just don't have the availability in their day because maybe they're working, 1 or 2 or 3 jobs? How do we involve
the parents that can't go to the schools? We have the rec centers, we have the parks and recs. So the families that I work with in my community, I meet them where they are. We have events at Parks and Rec we put it in with the PTA meeting. Okay, I need help with learning how to do the new multiplication or the new math. We have those meetings at the park. We have to learn how to meet families where they are. Like in Silver Oaks, they struggle. Silver Oaks is, the kids go to James. Most of those kids are below level in reading. We're taking them books. We have to learn how to meet families where they are. For the ones that can't come to the school, we have to go to them. We can't continue saying parents come to the school. We have to get outside of that. And sometimes we have to go to the community. We have to go out to the community and to the parents and to the student.
One of the things that, from working with Woodland Johnson over the past 4 years, 5 years, and creating a community school model, one of the things that we brought in was the parents. And we had modules of teaching the parents. So there may be some lessons learned just in some things that are accomplished with Woodland and others that are involved in the community school model that have direct outreach to parents and engaging them to ensure that they better understand how to help with this challenge. So we may want to consider, ensuring that that's part of whatever discussions have. What are the lessons learned from that model that can be applied more broadly across the district?
I think we have to approach it.
I was gonna say, you guys are talking my language. There's a couple of things that are actually on the docket for planning that I've seen successful in previous districts, called our community learning series, and it kind of speaks to the point of what you said. You bring it to the community, and whether that be on a physical bus. I mean, we have almost launched right before we left Clay County. We were creating a situation where we took the community learning series on the road, and we actually created, well, we had the framework ready for doing whatever topic that was pressing in that pocket of community, whether it be mental health, digital literacy, whatever the topic is. Take the show on the road, take it to the community, and physically on wheels, you know, if you have to, and invite them on the bus and have sessions there. Or, you know, like Alicia said, taking it to the rec centers. So one thing that I think you'll see, and I think an action step that I'm hearing indirectly here, is creating a format like something like a community learning series where we address the digital literacy piece with our parents and caregivers to help their students be successful. And I think we have some great people already on staff that are very familiar with that work, and will, you know, as soon as we get the ability to really connect with people and get more, you know, more than closer than 6 feet apart, I think that's going to be better for us as we launch the community learning series. So those are great ideas.
Great ideas. I know Monica wanted to share something too.
Yeah, I agree with everyone saying, but I also think that it could be, you know, differentiate, be a little simpler than that. I mean, we're talking about technology in the sense of computers and laptops and things like that, but what parent doesn't have a phone? What student doesn't have a phone? You know, the district has a YouTube channel. Why not have these tutorials available via YouTube link, right? Like I did that a lot with my students. I was like, okay, I would record myself showing my students how I wanted them to log into the learning platform and do the lesson. That way parents aren't tied to a specific place or time. They get it via their phone. They look at it at their convenience and, you know, can go through it that way. So I think that there's many ways to do it, but I don't want to leave that part out, because that YouTube piece or that piece there goes directly to a phone, and they all have those. You know.
You're right. And just like Brian said, you know, we're going, what's the new normal look like? Well, if we're leveraging technology, and we might be considering, you know, doing things differently with our students with regard to that, then why not leverage it for our parents too? And like you said, Monica, you know, if everybody has a phone, and we can, you know, put things, we have that YouTube channel, we can put things out there, and they can look at them at when they have time, you know, whether it's, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night or on the weekends. Hopefully they'll all want to, you know, invest in their children's future by being a part of it and having the access. But having access to that is the biggest piece, right? It's having the students having access to it and the parents having access to it equally as well. So Josephine, you've been awfully quiet.
Well, I think that I wanted to address the equal access, because what COVID did was it shined a big light on what we already knew as far as evidence and data. All of us in the community have been speaking about this for a very long time, and a lot of times I'll go to meetings. You know, I'm Latina, you know, and I would go to meetings and I would see Hispanic parents, you know, there wanting to fully participate in the child's education, but they didn't have translation. And we're required to actually have multilingual translators available, and we have programming to do that. And how do we bridge those gaps with tech? But my therapist hat will go on and say another way to bridge the gap in tech is also making things that do not necessarily have to be digital back to paper, in the sense, because learning, when people forget about human beings, is we learn with all of our senses: touch, sight, sound, smell. All of us can remember what a book feels like when you crack it open, what it smells like. Your memory of how you learn, especially from K to 6, is very multi-sensory. So digital reading is not very successful with human beings because we're multi-sensory learners, especially at a much younger age, in how we process things. So that's something that we can go back and look at and crunch numbers. And this is really beneficial for us to really put paper back in the hands of children, as far as especially for reading. And then the other thing is the digital divide cannot be solved in public schools alone. This is a community issue where the federal government and our local government needs to recognize that we need task force and we need funding, because the reality is, as a child who grew up very, very poor and in poverty, $10 a month was something we did not have, even for Wi-Fi. And not every business is going to give free Wi-Fi or is going to give us access to certain things, because they have to make a living as well. And as we move forward with our technology and how our children are required to communicate, especially from middle and high school, my high schoolers cannot survive without having access as far as their curriculum and being able to do their work, without having access to the internet, without having access to the digital curriculum and digital books. And it was very challenging because I work from home. We lost a computer, and I will tell you, when you have 3 or 4 children, it's almost impossible. And this is not something that the public schools can lift alone. This is something that I think is, we need to create a task force to really address the community issue, because the truth is, in our rural settings, they may not have internet access at all. And we've seen that across America. And Hillsborough County is very large, and a lot of people forget, very rural in a lot of our areas. And are those children having access to internet fully? Because my internet goes in and out. So my suggestion and my kind of ask is, going along with what everyone else is saying, is we need to bring other people in, because this is something we're not going to be able just to resolve within the public school, because the public school does not control internet access in the rural areas. The public schools does not control Wi-Fi speed. The public schools does not control, by the way, every single program that has an update, and that the computer that's outdated 2 years from now. Like, the reality is, if we're gonna have digital books all the time, are we gonna hand out a new laptop every 4 years, every time the child goes every 4 years? Because the truth is, the technology moves so fast and the programming gets so updated that the old computer won't work and the old program won't work. Yeah. And start demanding from the educational institutions that sell to our school systems to actually have things that are in par with what corporate America has. So that's my input.
No, those are good points, because I'm in a rural area. Even it goes rural even a little further east, and there were several students who live in the farthest corners of southeast Hillsborough County that we bought hotspots as a school district that we just weren't able. They didn't have the tower. They didn't have the access because of being rural. And unfortunately, the schools were able to provide paper copies of assignments, and they could go to the school and on a weekly basis and pick those up. But that was a big challenge, and I think we can use that 9 weeks as kind of a learning experience that we went through the last 9 weeks of school. It was an eye opener to see how many students lack the access to a digital device, and how important that is to have a combination, like you said, Josephine, of it can't just be digital. It's got to be a combination of tangible items and technology, because that's just realistically moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, going into the school year, and we're going to wrap up this question. We probably talk all night about this, really. But looking forward to if we do go back to school, we don't know yet. The superintendent hasn't made an announcement on what we're going to do going back to school this year. But if we go back to a traditional setting, we know that not every student, even in our schools right now, in every single school, there are different ratios of computers to students, right? And so you've got, and Alicia might be able to speak to this, you've got some PTAs that raise money and they're able to buy extra computers for their students, and some PTAs that aren't able to do that. And how do we get to a point where the ratio of student to computer is more equal throughout the school district? And maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I don't know what, Terry, if you've got some ideas based on your experience, and Alicia, but or everybody really has experience in dealing with that. But I think we have to get to a place where students have equal access on their school sites to computers, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
So, you know, the one thing that it would be great to be one-to-one. And, you know, if we had an unlimited pot of money to get everyone one-to-one access, you know, we would go that route. But we also have to understand in the classroom, a one-to-one ratio is not necessarily what you need in order to have effective instruction, but you're absolutely right. We have to be strategic about our funding sources. The state did used to provide a digital allocation, a digital classroom allocation to help support districts with providing, you know, that equitable access to technology. They have cut that funding down to zero over the last few years, and it's been a real challenge for school districts to maintain, because to Ms. Josephine's point earlier, computers get outdated, right? And you have to refresh, and the cycle really goes around about 3 to 5 years before you have to phase out computers. So I think to answer the question, though, we need to begin by setting an expectation that across the district, we're going to look at a certain ratio, whether that be 7 to 8 computers in a classroom, so that teachers can effectively conduct small group instruction with maybe a blended rotation, starting there and making sure that you establish a reasonable expectation around what funding do we have, what funding sources could we tap into, such as businesses, educational foundations, looking at some of our supplemental allocations. So, you know, we have Title I supplements to our schools. Are we being strategic about how we're allocating our Title I fundings at, you know, school A, B, or C to ensure that we have sufficient technology in all classrooms? And it's really about setting those expectations around what, as a district, what bar do we want to meet now, and phase that up until we can achieve more of a one-to-one ratio. We were forced really into a one-to-one ratio under the pandemic, but if we have at least a 2-to-1 ratio, you can effectively deliver instruction in the classroom as well as accomplish all the things that we've discussed so far tonight. And so it's about reasonable expectations and being strategic about the funding sources that you have, that I think moving forward, I think that this district leadership team will definitely be taking a look at, so that we're maximizing the funding that we do have, the little bit that we have, to ensure the equitable resources in our schools.
So we have the challenges of today, which you're so eloquently describing, but we also have challenges of tomorrow. You know, and what I'm referring to is 5G. So if we aren't, you know, and Josephine mentioned forming a task force, you know, and she's right. It's not just the school district, but, you know, as a community, we ought to be really thinking about how we become a 5G community and have aspirational goals, because that's probably the only way we're going to rid that 41% of Black and brown kids that don't have internet access, is by making their whole community 5G.
And as Terry said, the one-on-one, when it really wasn't one-on-one, it was more of, depending on the family size, 3-on-1 and trying to share the laptop in the home. But like you say, the PTAs, some PTAs in achievement schools, money is definitely totally different than schools out like Roland Park or Lord. So having those businesses partner with the achievement schools, so the makeup of the achievement schools can look like the others. I had 3 kids that went to Roland Park, and the education that they received and the technology and the experience that my 3 oldest received at Roland Park is totally different than what my son is getting at She High. And it shouldn't be like that. And my daughter is over at Armwood in the collegiate program. Even with the collegiate program, the Magnum program, and the regular school is different. You should never go to a school and see the difference in one school, the collegiate and the regular, and also in the achievement schools and other schools. All schools should have the same makeup. You should be able to see
Consistency, yeah.
the same and you don't. It's definitely not there.
So I think equality, when it comes to the digital divide in our county, will always start as, you know, if we form a task force in our county, especially starting with our district, it starts with the data. Because if you don't have the data of what the inequality is, you can't, you know, really qualify to move forward. So it starts with the data. Why is it different? And we need to exclude what the PTSAs are doing. Those are cushions, but I know that what happens in our communities is a lot of our schools get thousands of what's donated locally. But we need to look at how we divide those resources to ensure that every single student has equal access to the ability that we can provide. The access, it should be equally distributed as much as it can. And the Title I schools, as you said, to make sure that we're addressing the technology. And then the task force, if, you know, we'll write down these ideas to start, you know, bring the community together, know that this is not a public school issue. This is a community, really national issue that we need to start putting some serious push behind and funding.
Yeah, well, it's very unfortunate that we've been pretty much defunded technology-wise when it's probably more important than it ever has been to our students. And so that's something, to me, that's an actionable item coming as, you know, from a policymaker's perspective that we can take to Tallahassee, right? So that's something that, you know, we can suggest putting on our legislative platform to support technology. So, but I'm interested to hear any other thoughts on that for actionable items. Those are all great, and that's all great. Monica, you're awfully quiet. We're kind of wanting to hear your perspective on that.
I know we have to move on. And the only thing that I would have to add, because I don't disagree with what anyone has said, I just remember that there being a challenge, and I'm going to kind of toe lightly on this because I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it might be something to look into, is that one of the possible barriers or challenges that we face is that I hear the conversation being about technology and like the purchase of, so funds, right? But there are times when, you know, donations are available. And several times I've been told that if I get something, a computer donated by an outside agency, the district will not, they will not put the district parameters and all that thing on it. So it'd be something that I can use in my classroom. And granted, you know, I don't want a junker from, you know, 12 years ago, but there's been a few opportunities in which, you know, people have small businesses who've upgraded their system, you know, but would work perfectly for ours. And frankly, better than the ones that we have in our classrooms now and different things like that. And we're not able to accept those donations because then the district won't support putting the programs and things on it so that we can use it in our classroom. And I don't know what the reason is behind it, but I think it's something to look into because not everything has to be a purchase, you know. Okay. And if I have, you know, if I have a way to get some additional computers in my room, then, you know, I need them. So help me do that.
Yeah, it's hard to turn down a donation if someone wants to give you, you know, computer systems for your classroom. And so that's certainly something that we can, you know, look into. I don't know, Terry, if you've got any insight to that, why that might be, or if that's something that we can look into, because I know it hurts probably as a teacher, it hurts your heart to have to turn down a donation to your classroom. So
yeah, absolutely. That's something definitely we can take a look at and see, you know, what rationale do we have for not accepting you know, valuable resources for our students. So
right.
yeah, I'll take a look at that for you. And you know, I understand there's some requirements, security requirements, but we should be doing everything we can to accept resources that are going to help us achieve our goals. So
yeah, let's find a way, you know, if we can find a way to, yes, that helps our students, that benefits our students. You know, sometimes organizations do things certain ways because that's how they've always done them. And I think with the new superintendent and some new administration, we can hopefully, you know, think outside of the box and maybe find a way to, yes, and not always just do things because, well, that's how we've always done things, right? So that's a good point. And you're right, we do need to move on to a next topic. So we're a little bit after 8 o'clock, but we did want to tee up the next topic a little bit about implicit bias, and hopefully we have time to finish the topic and come up with some actionable items, but I'll let Ms. Amato is going to tee it up for us.
Okay, so the community has highlighted the impacts of implicit bias as an issue for equal access to public education. Implicit bias is also known as implicit social cognition. It refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. Residing deep in our subconscious, the implicit associations we harbor in our subconscious cause us to have feelings, attitudes about other people based on characteristics such as cultural group, race, ethnicity, age, or appearance. These associations develop over the course of a lifetime, beginning at a very early age through exposure to direct and indirect messages. Extensive research has documented disturbing effects of human behavior of implicit racial biases in a variety of realms, ranging throughout society, including in classrooms, workplaces, and the legal system.
Okay, so we probably should start with that question first, but now that you're all warmed up, we can kind of jump into that one. So, all right, so racial bias and implicit bias, we know that exists and in society, not just in the classroom, not just in our school district, but we know that it impacts our interactions with each other on a day-to-day basis. So let's start the conversation about implicit bias and how you think that the district can approach that for as something to try and overcome. What can the district do to help address implicit bias? Monica?
Yes, thank you. I have to jump in, so I'm sorry if anybody wants to go first. So one of the things that, so, we have the climate that we have today, and I just think that it is imperative that the district looks at implicit bias training for all teachers of all grade levels all the time. I'll say this, there are implicit bias trainings out there. I'm not saying that they don't exist. They're out there. They come up on our PDS, but like everything on PDS, you take a training that might be interesting to you, right? So that doesn't necessarily reach every teacher in the district. It reaches the teacher who took the training and then who might come back to their school and talk to a few other teachers about it, so on and so forth. Implicit bias training, in my opinion, needs to be done. So here are the actionable items. Because the first of all is, well, let me step back. You have some teachers who will think, oh, I treat all of my students the same. It's a very uncomfortable conversation, but we have to be in a place that we're comfortable with the uncomfortable. This is just period. We have to be okay with being uncomfortable, having these conversations, because the only way you're going to be able to look in the mirror. Looking in the mirror is tough, and realizing, oh, I actually do think of, this student differently than I think of this student. Then you think, wow, how does that impact the way that I've actually treated this student? So we have to be able to look in the mirror. So forcing that conversation looks like having all new teachers at new teacher orientation have implicit bias training. Have all teachers have implicit bias training during pre-planning, just as they have the safety training at the beginning of the school year. It is that important. We sit through safety training every year, and it's important. This, in my opinion, is as important as safety training. All teachers in the district then need to have follow-up implicit bias training and workshops monthly, so that this is an ongoing, just continuous conversation, because our district is fluid, our teachers are fluid in the district. So I may be a teacher who goes, well, I don't need implicit bias training. I don't teach Black or brown children, until that one Black or brown child moves into your neighborhood and goes to your school. Or I then choose to move where I am to go to a different school, and now I'm in a different, so that's what we need to do. I feel very, very, as you can tell, I'm very passionate, feel very strongly about it, but it can't be an option that you can take on a PDS. If you happen to be a CTA member, then they have those trainings available, which they do, and I appreciate, but it needs to be something that is hands down across the board, you know, can't skirt around it. It's going down on a regular basis.
So I wanted to add, Monica, I'm going to support those suggestions as far as I was a civil rights investigator and a human rights investigator, and I created training, bias training, for the Sheriff's Department on Long Island. And I worked full time to support the county in continual bias training. And as a therapist with over 30 years of experience, with human behavior, it takes 7 years to change one behavior of constant reinforcement, positive reinforcement. So bias training does have to be reinforced quarterly at the minimum. It can't be annual. It can't be a check the block. And I understand some people get defensive, but the reality is you don't know that you have implicit bias, because
Right.
the truth of it, all of us have bias for something.
Yep.
And that is just a fact. But how that bias translates into action and how we treat people is something that it has to be discussed and supported, to know that we do not do that. And this is a journey that all of us have to be on. So I love your suggestions. They're dead on, you know, they're dead on as, you know, a requirement. I agree.
Thank you.
And I think we have to get people outside of their comfort zone and have those uncomfortable conversations, which we don't generally have, right? I mean, I treat all four of my children differently. So you know that there's going to be some inherent implicit bias that has occurred out of years and years of your experience, your life experience. And so to have multiple trainings on a regular basis will, you know, it may not create a situation where it goes away completely, because you've had your entire lifetime to create these biases, right? But it can certainly, repetitively address and bring to light and have those conversations that are necessary to have about how you interact with each other, not just students, but with each other as, you know, as adults too.
Right. May I also add, I've been recommending this to anybody who listen, is if you have not yet, the viewing audience and anybody on the panel, if you have not seen 13th, that's on Netflix, it's a documentary about the 13th Amendment. It is a really good documentary, and it really helps kind of understand how our nation has framed this, in essence, thought process and kind of like brainwashing, if you will, you know, to some degree. So it's called 13th. It's on Netflix. It definitely is an eye opener, and it definitely helps you understand why now in 2020, you know, we are still, you know, having this conversation. We're having this conversation in 2020, and it's not because a generation of folks, you know, brought us up this way. This is, again, it's one of those kind of institutionalized things that has just been reinforced and restated and re-shown and supported. And we've got to move away from this if we're going to do anything different for the next generation.
Monica, I definitely agree with you. Training it's important. It needs to happen like yesterday, right? And it needs to happen more often than just like a check the box type of thing, especially with the way Hillsborough County is set up. You know, I have a Swahili family that I work with. She's treated differently in her classroom, and it shouldn't be that way. And I pointed out to the teacher, and she's like, "Oh no, it's fine. It's normal behavior for some." So I agree. Training to bring it out to the forefront of what they're doing and how it affects the student.
Oh, Josephine, I think you're on mute still.
No, okay, so I didn't know. So I run Safe Bus for Us, which is we advocate for student safe paths to school. And it's speaking about implicit bias. So we've always been advocating equal means every student gets a seat on the bus. So when we think about implicit bias, how does it come out in laws? in policy, procedure, and the implementation of the policy and the procedures. And the school bus is one of the biggest highlights I can think of. A lot of people don't know this. The American school bus is 7,000% safer than any other mode of travel to school. What does that mean? When your child's in a car seat, they're 70% less likely to die. If your child is on a school bus, they're 7,000% less likely to die in a crash. The #1 killer of our kids are crashes. A lot of people do not know that. So to deny a child a school bus is like denying them a life vest or a lifeboat. And you tell them, hey, you live 2 miles from shore, jump out. You guys that are 2 miles from shore, swim for your life. And the data tells us that 100% of our Title I schools do not have safe school bus transportation to school within 2 miles. 100% of our schools with 60% more minority students do not have safe school bus transportation within 2 miles. In Hillsborough County, in the state of Florida, we are the 2nd highest pedestrian death rate in the nation. We're 3rd for human trafficking, and over 50% of our schools have 100 or more registered sex offenders along the 2-mile radius of school. Now, why is all this data important and the truth about the school bus and the dangerous walking path in reference to implicit bias? We're going to go back to the road that brought Brown versus Board of Ed. In Brown versus Board of Ed, one of the cases brought forth in Virginia and South Carolina was about school bus, where segregated schools, the white children had a school bus and the black children didn't have a school bus as part of segregation. Now, as we move forward and we said, well, we're going to equalize it and we're going to make sure we're going to desegregate our schools and we're going to provide funding equal for the schools, well, somewhat. And the school buses were part of that. But then suddenly we had laws that said, if you live 2 miles or 1 mile or 1.5 miles, you don't get a bus. So as a former civil rights investigator, I look at it and I say, okay, does the policy on its facia discriminatory? No, because it's based on distance, right? Now let's look at the data. How many children of color are denied the bus? Then the data tells us more children of color, more black children, more Hispanic children are denied a public bus to public school over public roads based on distance. But the policy is disparate, creates a disparate impact. That's what bias is. A law was created based coming all the way down from Brown, from before Brown, saying, oh, we're not denying you the bus because of the color of your skin or because your ethnic origin. We're saying it's on distance. But the distance policy does the same thing. And you know how far it goes? In Hillsborough County, I live over 2 miles from my local school. I have hazardous walking conditions as defined by the state of Florida. And my children were denied the bus that stops, and I kid you not, in front of my house. And what's the difference? We're Hispanic American. What else is the difference? 90% of the children killed on the path to school in Hillsborough County in the last 5 years have been children of color. Why? Because over 130,000 of our students do not have equal access to the school bus. But on top of it, if you want to look at the impact of implicit bias on this policy, on this law, it doesn't make fiscal sense. One of the #1 reasons, causes, the top 3 that impacts children attending school is the lack of transportation. We lose funding when children aren't in their seats, but we deny them transportation. We also put 130,000 cars on the road, creating congestion, creating the impact of congestion. And by the way, all of our car insurance that went down during COVID because less cars are on the road, when we put 130,000 more students on the road and their parents, or kids walking on railroad tracks or in drainage ditches, our insurance rates go up. It's bad public policy. It costs us more money. And yet we still deny the bus. And it's all connected to the implicit bias that started way back before Brown versus Board of Ed.
That sounds like another actionable item because I know that is part of a law from the state. And I know that you're specifically referring to Hillsborough, but I also know that's an issue across the state of Florida and not just Hillsborough County as far as funding goes for transportation, and the unintended consequence of taking that law and putting a distance to it and actually hurting our Black and brown children, because they're the ones who ultimately are not getting access to transportation, therefore not getting access to school. So that's something that we can continue to take to lawmakers and tell them the story about why our Black and brown students aren't getting access to education, because they're not being able to get on a bus to take them to school, and that's where they need to be.
And it's nationally. It's not just in Hillsborough.
It's not even just in Florida. It's an issue across the country. But that's a good example of an unintended consequence that a law had, that underlying that could be implicit bias as well. So
I'll chime in a little bit on implicit bias. First, I want to thank Monica for the suggestion. I think that's absolutely necessary. It can't be a shot in the arm. You have to continually readdress the implicit bias training, even more than annually, I think. And so, I think implicit bias is one of those things that actually contributes to the achievement gap. It's probably a major factor in that. And it's not because of any, like we said, it's not direct, it's not explicit, but it's something that it is, excuse me, right here. It's not explicit. It's something that, it's those unconscionable decisions, the unconscious decisions that we make day to day. It's about where we're placing students in certain classes or in certain areas of the classroom, or we're not calling on certain students. Those are the things that begin to, compound and actually create a learning environment, a negative learning environment for students of color. And it's not even something that we think about explicitly a lot of times. And so we have to bring that uncomfortable conversation, through training and through a forum that it's a safe place for people to talk about it, so that they can begin to make conscious decisions around what are they doing in their classroom that may be creating a negative learning environment for students. And that has to happen over and over again so that those behaviors do change. And the challenge is too, and even in times like this, there's that heightened anxiety around discussions about race. You don't want to be perceived a certain way by talking, about a subject that could be so sensitive. And so we have to break through that, because sometimes that holds us back. That anxiety holds us back. We don't address the real concerns, and we say, oh, I've just had that, I've had that training before, or I don't do that with my students. And so I think leaders have to be equipped to help with their faculties really kind of get to that point where they can have those safe conversations, whether it be in smaller groups where they can, create the relationships with other teachers and other people within the building to talk about what are some of the actions that I may be doing indirectly or directly that are contributing to some of the declines in achievement of students, that are creating a negative environment for students that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives. And so I totally agree. It has to be something comprehensive. It has to be something continuous, and it's a real thing. And I think it actually has a major contribution to our achievement gap, that if we don't address it, we're never gonna close the gap. We may narrow it, but we're never gonna close it until we really address this issue of implicit bias.
And we talked a lot about addressing this issue with the adults, because that's really important, obviously. We haven't talked a lot about the kids. These kids grow up and they go out into the workforce and they take whatever implicit bias they've learned as a child into the world. And I know Brian has probably seen in the business community, he has probably experienced some of that as well. So what are your thoughts about not just having this training for adults, but of having this conversation, this training for students? How do you do that? And do you think it's important to do that?
Well, let me just say that I appreciate also the points that Monica brought up, and Terry, I appreciate your response, but we're not going far enough. I mean, we're just scratching the surface. We have to acknowledge, this is not an easy conversation, but we have to have it because you're in the business of educating our kids, which is educating our communities. So we need to rid ourselves of some false narratives. And in that process of doing that, we know that it's time for some of our learning devices to be more modern. It's time for some of our history lessons to be more updated. It's time for some things that are happening in the classroom and outside of the classroom to really change. And if anybody wants to know where I stand on any of these issues, read the op-ed I wrote, read some of my other pieces. So I bared my soul. So I'm not afraid to have tougher discussions. We're just scratching the surface. We have to have uncomfortable conversations. We have to acknowledge that implicit biases exist in our society. We also have to acknowledge that systematic racism exists in our society. And until we do those things, we won't move forward as a community. Biases affect our decisions, all decisions. They affect hiring practices. They affect promotion decisions. They affect vendor relationship decisions. They affect jobs like yours, jobs like the superintendents, jobs like Melissa's on the school board. So until we start to really have those very tough, uncomfortable conversations, I'm afraid that we're gonna whitewash this. We have to have the tougher conversations, and because you're part, Melissa, Terry, you're part of one of the largest hiring organizations in our community. But I dare ask, does your, what's, if I were to ask the question, the uncomfortable question about, the mentorship to help promote African Americans so that kids get to see African American throughout not just the classroom, but the other parts of the school system. That's very important. One of the things we do at Mort Elementary is we bring the fifth graders that are in leadership positions into our office to have meetings. And I bring the kids into, so it averages 12 to 15 kids a semester. And we bring the kids into so they could see what an African-American business looks like. And they could have fifth graders come in and have business. They come in and we talk business for an hour, and we have working lunches. So as we're trying to expose them to plant a seed, so maybe one day they too will want to be business leaders in the community. So we have, it just goes so much further than implicit bias training for teachers.
Brian, I'd like to piggyback. Is that okay, Melissa?
Yes, I just want to let everybody know it is almost 8:30, so we'll try and wrap up the conversation and then talk about the actionable items, and then maybe even if you have suggestions for, I think some future topics could be born from conversation that we've had this evening, so that this might be an opportunity to talk about what the next forum could be or could look like. But go ahead, Monica.
So, and Brian, I appreciate your point because that was my part two of the implicit bias was the education of the real history of America for our students. You mentioned, we've got to be real about how this country, or I'll say it this way, we got to be real about how this country was formed, right? We can't look at the Disney version anymore. We have to be realistic about the country that we live in. And I think what has happened is that because there's some uncomfortable topics and events that have gone on, we just kind of skip over them. And, I think about, my daughter when she was in kindergarten, and, they had this whole big Thanksgiving feast, and we're still teaching our children that the Pilgrim and the Indians came together and had a great Thanksgiving feast. And that didn't happen any more than after the Civil Rights Movement. The magic wand was magic. magic wand was waved and now all people are created equal. That's not how any of those stories go. And until we're able to truly, we shouldn't wait till high school or beyond. When, you know, the George Floyd stuff was happening, do you know how many people reached out to myself? And my husband was like, wow, I really wish I knew, you know, I really wish I had learned this in school. This isn't at all what I was taught in history class and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of gaps that we have to fill. And, you know, I don't have the luxury of not filling those gaps for my two little brown girls, you know, my two little black girls. I don't. I have to fill those gaps for them right now. Right? Did I think they were a little young? Probably. But did it matter? No, because I know how they are potentially viewed. And so I think that we really have to do a better job when it comes to curriculum and tying things together. I was looking at the 4th grade curriculum. They talk about, I know my daughter was in 4th grade. She went to St. Augustine, and they talked about, you know, when the Spaniards came over and, you know, created that colony. Well, on those same streets, there was a slave market many years later. On those same streets that they talk about the Spanish, the acquisition there in the trade with the British and the fighting and all that, there was also a huge civil rights action that took place there in St. Augustine. So she didn't know that from class. We spent an extra day and learned that. But why not? If we're going to St. Augustine, if we're talking about, you know, all of this, why not add it all in together? It's like bits and pieces are coming together, and I just don't think that we can afford to do that. And I don't think it starts in high school. It starts in elementary school. It starts in kindergarten. But again, you got to just say what it is and call it what it is, and just be okay with its history. It's how America was made, right? It's history.
Right.
So call it that and keep it moving.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And that's something definitely that, Terry, I know you're listening. So I don't know if you
I'll
want to
just real
respond to
quickly,
that.
just to kind of give you an update. One of the things that when I first got here, I joined a task force, and it was the African American History Task Force. And there's a group of about 25 individuals from around the community, inside of the district, outside of the district, that are a part of this task force. And Monica, those things that you're talking about are exactly the topics that we have been discussing within that task force. So I hope we're talking about with curriculum and how to make sure it's very integrated, and that we're not teaching pockets and certain things about history in isolation, but we have an integrated approach across all of our curriculum when it comes to African American history. And we even talked about from the origins of Africa, not just African American history, but even origins from Africa. And so I just want to give that update, because that kind of aligns to, I think, the action step that could help in that. And what you mentioned is this task force meeting consistency. We have an elementary, middle, and a high school curriculum group that are reviewing current curriculum, taking recommendations from the task force. So hopefully, I think something really good will come out of this that will help address some of those challenges that you just mentioned there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that update, Terry. I'm glad to hear that, and that might be something that we can continue a conversation on within a next forum. It also sounds like possibly, how we hire and mentor our teachers and administrators into teachers in leadership positions throughout the school district. Is there for any final thoughts that you'd like to share, or things that you would like to see in future forums? And I've been taking notes, and we do have some, I think we have some good actionable items that we talked about. Hopefully, Josephine, you've been taking notes as well. But any final thoughts that you want to share with the group that we can take away with us this evening? And then I'll let Josephine close it out for the evening, if that's okay with you, Josephine. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
I will start. Conversation, it was definitely needed to get started. It's been a lot of forums that Brian been on, and we all have been joined, a lot of Zooms and forums. Now I'm ready to see action. I'm ready to see some work actually being done as it relates to Black and brown kids. I have two sons, and it's important to me as a mother to see the action. And another subject for another forum, Josephine, is the prison to pipeline. We have to address that prison to pipeline. You know, it's talked about barely, and we keep going, but we have to have action items to address the prison to pipeline.
Thank you, Alicia. I think that that is a topic that's been coming up more and more recently, the school to prison pipeline. And I think that there are some expectations of the school district, and I would be interested to hear some conversation around that and some actionable items around that as well. Anyone else want to share any final thoughts? Or
I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I know it's been kind of thrown into the frying pan near the last 3 months in Hillsborough County, but I tell you, this is a passionate community, and just the representation on this forum just really ignites my passion, and I'm very excited to help really take action on the suggestions that are made here. And just during my time over the last 3 months, I just appreciate such a passionate community, and I look forward to helping out and assisting any way that I can. And thanks again for inviting me.
and thanks for joining us, and thanks for being willing to take some of these items back and work with the school district on some of the more actionable items. Brian, you look like you would like to share something.
Just want to add, thank you very much for allowing me to participate. You know, and Josephine and Melissa, thanks for putting this together. It is so important to have meaningful dialogue about tough issues. And it's so important to have meaningful dialogue and community feedback to ensure that we are providing the best that we can for our kids that go through the Hillsborough County public school system. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. And I can't take the credit for putting this together. That's really Josephine. I'm just moderating, so. but I appreciate that. Monica, anything you want to share?
Yeah, again, I do appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, and I do thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. And I just want to, and I appreciate the fact that we actually did leave away with some actionable items. And I would just kind of like to reiterate, you know, some of these things can happen very quickly, and I know that those things that will. But we also have to be reminded that this is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And so not everything is going to happen overnight, but I also want to make sure that the ball isn't dropped. Right? Oh, well, we tried it, but it didn't work. So there's this, yes, there's some things we can do right tomorrow, and there's some other things it's going to take time. And so I just want to just be reminded and just remind those who are joining us that, you know, it will take time, but the effort has got to continue to be there for there to be any real change in results. And like anything else, you're not going to see it necessarily immediately. It's going to be years down. But if we kind of keep ourselves in the trenches and really commit to doing it, then the long haul will be all worth it. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know someone who's going to keep us all accountable for the actionable items, and she'll probably be giving us updates either on her Facebook page or at school board meetings coming to talk, and that's Miss Amato. So Miss Amato, thank you again for coordinating the forum and putting this together. I hope everyone was able to get some good things out of it, and we do have some actionable items. And so with that, I'll pass it back over to you to wrap it up. But thank you so much from all of us for letting us participate this evening.
I really appreciate everyone participating and being part of the beginnings of the conversation. And it is a journey. It is not a sprint. This is a marathon that we're going to go on. And this is the beginning, the very beginning of the conversation. An implicit bias that we, started with, and we didn't have enough time, but our data tells us it impacts all of the decision making and policies and follow through of procedures. And we'll have more topics for the school to prison pipeline, which is something I'm very passionate about, for actionable items. I know areas where that we can impact that multifaceted issue quickly, and then long term. I love hearing the timeline requests, and that those are really good. I'm going to type up a lot of the suggestions and send it out to the entire team, the entire forum. And so we can bring to the superintendent so he can utilize this tool for ideas of what would work on the front lines. But as Mr. Butler said, that there is a lot to discuss, and that's why I pictured this as something ongoing, so we can start highlighting solutions for the challenges our students face, because in reality, equal access to public education is equal access to the American dream for all of our children. And that's everything we want for our entire country. This is an American issue. This is an American dream for all of our children to have equal access to the opportunity to reach their highest educational potential. It is not something that should be denied to any one of our children. And we can and will fix this as a community. But we have to actually start working together and start making actionable items. So I really appreciate everyone being here. I really appreciate everyone listening to about how transportation is being denied equally to all of our students. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thanks again. Have a wonderful evening. And I know that Ms. Amata, you can count on her to send you some follow-up and keep you updated on some of the actionable items that we talked about this evening. So with that, hopefully we had some good viewership tonight. Again, I believe that this recorded version will be available on YouTube as well for those who are not able to watch it on Facebook or have access to Facebook. And I know we went over a little bit on time, but it was some really good. We probably could be here for another few hours talking about some of these things easily. But I'm glad to hear that that Ms. Amato wants to continue having forums on a regular basis, and we'll look forward to your next topics that you decide on. And thank you so much. And if you want to be a panelist again, you're more than welcome to join us back. Or I think that we might also rotate panelists as well to get different perspectives on some of these things. But you're always welcome to chime in and keep in touch and give us feedback. As a school district, as a school board member, you as stakeholders are so important for us to listen to, and that's how democracy works. And so thank you very much. So with that,
Thank you.
have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Happy Independence Day. All right,
Bye.
take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.